Homicide.
Hello, fellow Auraxians. The Engineer, the ultimate support role in Planetside. Although if I could, I would change the class's name to the Battle Engineer. Even though they have a lot of utility for supporting infantry and tanks, they can hold their own just fine when they find themselves alone or at the front of the line. Now I want to go over engineers in a different order here. Before we cover our loadout, I want to cover the engineer CERTS, because I build my engineer loadouts around the engineer's unique traits, which can be found under CERTS Engineer Passive Systems. The most important of which is called Quick Shield Recovery. When engineers take damage, their shields start recharging 2 seconds faster than any other class. And when an engineer's aircraft synergy is fully upgraded, that engineer will apply Nanite Auto Repair Level 1 to any aircraft it's in. This pairs very well whenever you have to run stealth or composite armor. That way you don't have to land every time you take a little bit of chip damage. When you are building out your engineer class, there are a few other things you want to look out for and make sure you get certed up ASAP. In your tool slot, get that nano armor kit maxed out as soon as possible. That increases the effectiveness of your repairs. Get your ammunition package upgraded. When you max it out, you can have 2 ammo packs on the ground. Then you can upgrade the cooldown time on your AI and AV turrets. And then in your Spitfire tab, if you max that out, you can carry additional turrets rather than having to run back to the Sunder every time you drop one or one dies. And the rest of it's pretty self-explanatory. Now let's dive into loadouts. My first loadout is built around basically solo engineer play. I generally prefer carbines on my engineer, but the battle rifle works nicely as well. The pistol I'm using I don't really like. It's kind of just to complete a directive, but there's some upcoming buffs, so pretty soon the Emperor might be a better option. Now when I'm playing solo, I like to carry the Spitfire turret, fondly known as Beepy to most Auraxians, a name he earned because of the noise he makes when he acquires a target. He has issues with durability unless you're using Robotics Technician, but he can perform a lot of roles. You can use him as cover to fire from, he adds a little extra damage, he can be a distraction when someone runs into a room where you're hiding, he can also alert you to infiltrators that are decloaking, or if you're covering one entrance, he can cover your flank and give you an announcement when someone comes in another door. Careful though, he has no problem mowing down friendlies, so be smart about where you place him. In my suit slot, I use the Advanced Shield Capacitor. This pairs really well with the engineer's unique quick recharge ability, allowing you to get your shields up very quickly after taking damage. In my grenade slot, I use the nano repair grenades. Now the engineer's sticky grenades are a lot of fun as well, but I've already Auraxiumed those. But your Spitfire turret becomes pretty darn beefy if you drop one of these repair grenades on it along with your own rep tool. You'll surprise a few enemies that expected an easy kill. And since this is primarily a gunplay loadout, I do run medkits. Now, on to implants. Robotics Technician is key to this loadout. The Spitfire turret is just not durable enough and you spend so much time repairing it without it. This implant gives your turret a reasonable amount of health and allows the turret to repair itself through chip damage. The other implant slot is not as important, but this loadout is based around gunplay and Battle Harden assists that the most. Okay, on to my next loadout, which I call Point Hold. This is the loadout I pull out when I'm running engineer for my outfit's ops, or I'm running public platoons and I expect to be in point hold scenarios. I generally stick to close range weaponry for this loadout, usually a carbine. It's got the right amount of versatility. But if I'm going into a biolab or some area where I expect to get max crashed, I will absolutely bring an archer. Being able to force an enemy to jump into the room is such an advantage. They lose speed, they lose accuracy. It really helps fortify the buildings. And if you're not using it as a blockade for the enemy, you can use it as some cover for your friendlies. Now these point hold scenarios are usually less about gunplay and more about seeing how many bricks of C4 or grenades you can survive. So flak armor is pretty key in those scenarios. I switch off between repair and sticky grenades in this loadout, and I usually run medkits so I don't have to depend so heavily on the medics. Now in this loadout, I still run Robotics Technician. To be honest, you don't have to run it with the hard light barriers. They're already really durable, but I like that it gives them a self-healing effect. When you're running this implant, it's kind of place them and forget about them. They're even more durable and they heal themselves. You can go about killing enemies rather than having to worry about keeping your barriers up. Now, I don't like running Carapace on the Engineer because it nullifies their unique shield recharge ability, but point holds are about surviving more than just explosive damage, also all the concussion and flash and EMP grenades. And so to deal with that mess, I run Ocular Shield. Okay, my next loadout is my vehicle driving loadout. For many of you, you might want to make this loadout your first loadout. For this one, I run the Archer. It is great for finishing off a severely wounded tank, or scaring off a pesky ESF if you don't have the right AA weapons on your vehicle. Now, the one thing the Archer is not good at is killing infantry, so I make sure to run a functional pistol here. Currently, that's either the Commissioner or the Underboss. In my ability slot, I do run the AV Mana Turret. I don't pull it out all that often, but every now and then it's good last-ditch effort. For my suit slot, I run the Mine Carrier. While tanking, I am constantly putting down tank mines. With this loadout, I can bring 5 tank mines along. That allows me to set up a trap that I can retreat to if I know where I'm going to be engaging. Or if I'm cruising along gunning a harasser, I can switch to the third seat and throw a few tank mines out the back. Repair Grenade is good for this loadout, but I usually run sticky grenades so I can self-detonate tank mines if I find an unsuspecting tank or sunderer. For implants, first I run an ammo printer, because a lot of times an ammo sundy's not nearby. And Sweeper HUD is a must-have so you can avoid all those enemy tank mines out there. Okay, and on to my final loadout, and that is for piloting aircraft. This loadout is primarily there so I can take advantage of the engineer's ability aircraft synergy. The weapons, abilities, and suit slot in this loadout are less important in this one because I usually use it for flying ESFs. But sometimes as a Galaxy or Valk pilot, I do ditch out and join the fight, so I kind of base it around what I expect to do in those scenarios. But I do use what I find are the most effective implants for flying, which is the ammo printer and the target focus ability. Alright, so let's dive into some of the theory of playing engineer based upon these loadouts, starting with the combat engineer. You cannot play the engineer like a heavy assault or a medium assault, that is the combat medic. Those classes can fall back on their tankiness, their shield, or their heals. And on top of that, they have a lot of damage per magazine with their assault rifles and their LMGs. Now, I've found myself in a difficult position here, but the first thing I'm going to do is try to cut down the angles I can be attacked from. I use my Spitfire as a combination of distraction and cover. And once I'm out of shield, I don't turn and fight. I'm looking for ways I can avoid damage long enough to get that shield back up, because on Engineer it pops back up fast. Engineers are much less capable of taking multiple targets on at once. Now, they can sustain indefinitely with their ammo packs, but they need to set themselves up in such a manner that they can have some downtime between engagements, so they can let those shields come back up and they can get a reload on their generally small magazine weapons. Now, when playing the Engineer solo, it's a lot harder to be the aggressor like you would with a combat medic or a heavy assault. To play them to their maximum potential, you're dependent on being near your Spitfire turret or near your shield wall. Sure, you could charge in without them, but you're generally better off with another class if that's how you're going to play. Being an engineer is not always about being the hero and getting a million kills. Sometimes you're just that obnoxious, annoying thing in a weird spot that they can't kill. And they're going to have to spend additional resources in terms of targeting and reloading and focusing on you to try to deal with you. And that's going to give your allies opportunities to locate where those enemies are at and go track them down and get them killed while they're focused on dealing with you. You'll notice in these clips, I'm never the primary target because I don't feel like the primary threat. The first thing shooting at them is the Spitfire turret. I'm going to focus on keeping that Spitfire turret up and running. And then when I have downtime and I can add firepower, I will do so. The Spitfire turret doesn't do a lot of damage, but it's basically painting all the targets for me. I wouldn't have noticed this light assault till he was on top of me if this Spitfire hadn't engaged the target. And don't you let other crafty engineers think they can get their Spitfire up in your territory. Get that weak Spitfire game out of here. The one massive advantage engineers have over heavy and medics is they are basically immune to chip damage. You can wear down a heavy assault shield or a medic's nano regen device, but engineers recover so rapidly with their class-specific ability that chip damage has very little effect on them. Now, the moment you know you've been playing your Spitfire engineer correctly is when they gotta load up a heavy assault, jump on top of their spawn room, and take your turret out from long range. Now let's move on to the point hold loadout. And we're gonna start looking at it from a friendly's perspective. I'm not the engineer here. But you can see what a boon it can be to friendlies to limit the ability for enemies to enter your point hold location. And these events inevitably turn into a mess of EMP, concussion, and flash grenades. So being prepared for that stuff is great. Here's one where we had been defending a biolab for a while, and we finally pushed enough of their pop out of the hex that we could push their base. And And the problem was I was running my combat engineer loadout in the biolab. And I even had a chance to change right here, but I failed to put my point hold flak armor loadout on. And a few minutes later, when all that overpop inevitably landed upon us, and we were working on defending one of the most indefensible structures in the game, I just was unable to properly support the maxes because I couldn't survive all the explosives. Okay, now let's move on to the third loadout, our tank driving loadout. Now hopefully, most of the time, the only part you need of this is your repair tool. But this loadout is designed so that when it's time to ditch your vehicle, you can still survive till a redeploy, or maybe even finish off that other tank or harasser you're engaged with. And that's where the archer and tank mines can really come into play. But once you get on the ground, some of their infantry may come after you as well, and that's why it's nice to have a good secondary on hand. Ditch the archer and pull out your pistol if you end up in an infantry engagement. Then you can go back to dropping tank mines or pulling out your archer if you're trying to get some vehicles down. Enemy vehicles are going to expect you to have an archer and tank mines, so you're still a formidable enough opponent that they aren't going to want to get right up next to you. Cover is your friend when you find yourself in these scrambling engagements. You have better acceleration as long as you can keep a tree or a rock in between you or them. Play your cards right and you can get out of there with a few assists and no deaths. Do not underestimate the power of the archer, especially when used in groups. It becomes a formidable weapon against tanks, and its area effect explosive damage can chip away at infantry. Okay, fellow Auraxians, that covers most of my engineer play. I do have one more loadout that I use, but it's not really about playing engineer, it's about flying aircraft. And that's something for a different video. But before I go, I want to do one little add-on to this advanced training guide. A lot of people have requested that I release some raw footage of my play. Most of what I do is edited footage that speaks to whatever scenario I'm discussing. So I'm going to switch it up here and talk over some unedited footage so you can see the decision process from spawn. Now before I even spawned in, I knew I wanted to bring tank mines along here. So to make it easy to switch around loadouts, all I did was drop my archer and bring a carbine. Now this is a bit of a blooper here. I instinctively think that because I'm running a carbine, I'm going to have a Spitfire turret. I quickly realized that's not an option, so I just start engaging. My sticky grenade on the way in wore down their shields, and now I'm going to start sticking some tank mines in the windows. The max is a little bit far away, but I'm hoping he's going to walk over it after they have a few seconds to arm. Bingo, got him, and that max netted me a kill on that light assault in the corner as well. Now playing engineer, I'm kind of scared to be the first man walking in, so I really used that as just a scouting run. I was really just staring at my health bar expecting to be taking a lot of damage. But you'll notice I didn't actually take much damage. If I had just calmed a bit and focused on just one enemy, I probably could have netted one kill in the building and one kill when I was up on the rock. Notice how quickly my shields start recharging, and they'd come back even faster if I was running my advanced shield capacitor loadout. By the time I'm reloaded, I'm ready to go again. Now this is the point where, if you're being a true support engineer, you're supposed to sit there and wait. You've got about 3 maxes on the front line, and 3 more in the building that should lead that push. But they're taking way too goddamn long to do anything. So I'm going to get out there and find some cover just to make sure no one else is already doing what I did and hiding at that building or at that rocks. And now I'm going to go try and figure out just how many are on the other side of these stairs. Holy crap, that's more than expected. I'll just take the jump pad. Now what I like about these things is I've changed from being the guy pushing straight in front of them to being a guy coming from their flank. So on my way back, I throw a tank mine into him, hoping a max runs over it. Now right here I have an only in Planetside moment. I go to jump back and what happens? I run into the bottom of the Valkyrie, so I don't make it to the biolab pad. I'm going to speed my run back up a little bit. My first thought is just redeploy, but I landed kind of close to the lift pads, so I'll just go back there and then I can still flank them again. I'm kind of glad I didn't redeploy because I noticed there's a max sitting here suppressing our air. Remember, tank mines detonate if you throw them on a jump landing pad, so keep your distance because that's going to detonate right away. Always great to see more maxes in the mix because I know that tank mine's going to go off. Ba-boom. And now it's just kind of jump back and forth. You'll notice the VS have pushed back up on the building, so I'm really behind the front lines now. I don't want to spend too much time landed because they're going to figure out I'm there and start focusing on me. You can also catch a few free kills as unsuspecting people try to make it back to the fight. Okay, now they're mad. I've got a max and a heavy assault chasing me around in the jump pads. Another one of my tank mines finally detonates, netting me a triple kill. And now this Max flying by has decided he's had enough of it, and he's going to wait for me on the biolab side. So I'm going to be a little bit trapped here. But at this point, I've been enough of a nuisance that my friendlies are pushing out of the building because they weren't able to keep them contained by keeping pressure up there. And from there, we just clean them up. So guys, I hope that gives you a good feel of how I play engineer, and hopefully you can adapt some of these techniques into your playstyle. Thank you for your continued support, subscribing, liking, sponsoring, sharing. The next in this series will be along soon. And until next time, say it with me, I will see you Planetside.